So when we're looking at population pyramids, they're also called age structure diagrams. And what we're looking at is really a bar graph or a histogram of population data. So if you look at it, you'll always have females on one side, males on the other. Usually females on the right, males on the left. The graph is usually labeled. And you're gonna have people in the 0 to 4 age bracket in this first bar here. So this means, this is the percent of the population that's from the ages of 0 to 4 that are females. And this is the percent of the population that's 0 to 4 in males. Then you'll see 5 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 19, and so on. They all end up getting narrower at the top because when you get over 80, people start to, pass away. They start to move on. And you can use this to predict the population growth of a country, and you can also see the history of the country. So if you see this one here, you can see that it's a bit narrower at the base. You can see there's a lot of people between the ages of 35 and 50. So there would have been a population boom 35 to 50 years ago. And that this population will either be remaining stable or will be shrinking in the future because they have less young people. When you're looking at a population pyramid, you're gonna see the different age groups and also the sex data. So you can also split it in half to give you kind of the percentage set up this way, and it'll make it a little easier to see the sex ratio. And you can see that in Indiana, it's pretty equal. You usually end up having more women in a highly developed country at the top because they live a little bit longer. And there's some general shapes. So stage 2, that transitional or agricultural society, is usually going to be kind of a triangle shape. So fast growing, lots of young people. So lots of people in that pre-reproductive and reproductive age groups. Once you get into late stage 3, you get that industrial pyramid, and it's starting to stabilize. So you can see that it still has a wide base, but it's not growing as fast anymore. So you don't have a huge number of infants being born. The post-industrial pyramid shape will be kind of like a column. It's like the United States. It's always gonna narrow up a little bit at the top because you have, again, the elderly population, but this shows a slow growth or a stable population. And then stage 5 is going to be smaller at the bottom. So this would be something like Germany or Japan. You can also see things where there's population gaps. So here, if you see a big gap in usually males, particularly if they're older, this is going to indicate usually a war. I know that today we have more women who are allowed to go in combat. So maybe if you're looking at a current day pyramid, that'll start to change. But if you're looking at an elderly population or older population, you're gonna see that the gap is gonna indicate a war. So this population 2 to 3 generations ago, you could predict that there was some kind of war and a lot of men went off to fight. And again, we know that today that women can join the army and they can be in combat, but since this is an older population, 2 to 3 generations ago, it would have been mostly men. If you see a gap on both sides, it could either be an epidemic or maybe you had a baby bust where people stopped having as many kids. So maybe like here, this is usually, see how the population got bigger? Usually a baby boom, like the baby boomers born after World War II, and maybe population growth slowed down again, and then you have another baby boom. This is often what the population pyramids would look like for a country that has high rates of HIV, as you'll start to get that indent there from a fatal epidemic. So if you look at the top of the population pyramid, you're gonna have the elderly population. You wanna look at some of the age groups we break down in here. So this age group here, we call pre-reproductive. So this is your pre-reproductive age group. So those are children under the age of 15. So pre-reproductive. And then from this age group to this one, these are the reproductive age groups. Now, I'm not saying that everybody in that age group should be reproducing, but biologically, you're lumped as the reproductive age group. And then everything after about 50 or so, 45 to 50, is classified as post-reproductive. So look at this population in the Philippines. You can see this is a stage 2 country. It is rapidly growing. So you're gonna have a fast population growth. And then here, it's starting to slow down. Do you see how it's starting to get kind of thicker at the bottom and stop tapering off as much? Now you've got Mexico, a stage 3 country, where it's starting to slow down. So you still have a lot of people in the pre-reproductive age group and in the reproductive age group, but it doesn't slope down as much. So it's starting to slow down a bit. Here you've got the US, stage 4. So again, it's starting to get a little bit narrower and a little bit more columnar. We still have the baby boomer generation here where it kind of widened out. And then the baby boomer generation, there are a lot of them. So 20 years later, you see a lot of kids being born here. So you can see that history. But you can see that it's starting to narrow down. So a stable population, the United States, the NIR for the United States is about 0.5%, so slow growing. And then down here, it's more narrow at the bottom, stage 5. So this is Germany, and they have a negative RNI or NIR, so they're shrinking, stage 5. So really a population pyramid is just like 2 bar graphs laid on their side, looking at males and females in different age groups. You can also change the scale at which you're looking at population pyramids. So let's look at the states here. So if we get to a larger scale, now instead of a country, we're gonna look at different states. So Rhode Island is the slowest growing state in the country. And if you look at this population pyramid, you can see that there's less people in the pre-reproductive age group, a smaller group in the reproductive age group, and the biggest population is at the tail end of the reproductive age group. So you're gonna have a low TFR, 1.6, and it's a slow growing state. Now looks at Utah. Utah is one of the fastest growing states. Utah has a high rate of immigration and a higher total fertility rate than the rest of the country at 2.4. And you can see that they have a larger base, right? So they have a larger group of individuals in the pre-reproductive age group. And they have a lot of individuals in this young reproductive age group here. And this is probably going to be the population of people who are migrating into the country. If you look at Arizona, so now we're getting at a bigger scale. Let's look at Sun City, Arizona. It's not just the whole state, but we're gonna look at one city, so larger scale. So in Sun City, Arizona, wow, like it's a retirement community, right? Like this is a place where there's not a lot of young people. There's not a lot of people in that pre-reproductive group, not a lot of people in the reproductive age group, but there's a lot of elderly people. So it has a high dependency ratio, and obviously this is not a population that's growing due to people having kids. Let's look at Morgantown, West Virginia. So Morgantown, West Virginia is a college town. So look at this, you see this high proportion of young people. So we've got a high proportion of people in the reproductive age group, but really under the age of 25. And so you can see it's the same for males and females. And so we really have a university town. Historically, if it was just the males in this age group, you might think that maybe it was a town with a military base. So if you had a large male population, although that is starting to even out a little bit as more and more females join the military. And then if you look at Texas, it has a similar age structure to that of Mexico. So Brownsville, Texas is right across the Rio Grande, so it's right across the Mexico-US borders. And you can see that they're getting a lot of people moving in. So they have a pretty large base, so a large pre-reproductive age group, and they have a lot of people in this reproductive age group, and a lot of them have probably moved in. So a town or an area with high rates of immigration will probably have a slightly younger population. And why is that? Like most people who migrate are gonna be in this age group here, right? They're gonna be younger. Like you don't usually wait till you're 75 to start over in a new country. So if you have people in this young reproductive age group moving over, they're more likely to have children, which will increase the age of the generation behind them. So you can use population pyramids to predict that this city is going to get bigger. And you can also use it to see the history of the past. So just be able to interpret a few of these, and then we'll do some more practice with them in class tomorrow.